I was kind of going to leave it up to you guys what I'm going to read, because I've read so many times at the library before. So all of my selections are actually things that I've presented here before. But at the same time, my first book, The Magic Thief, came out in 2008, which is a fairly long time ago. And like some of you guys who might be interested in hearing me read from it were probably like 2 when this came out. So I thought maybe I'd give you the choice. I could read from The Magic Thief, if you want, or I could read from The Summerkin, which is my new book that's not even out yet. So I know you want Summerkin, because she's read Winterling, and she's a big fan of those books. But how about the other people? Would anybody like to hear Magic Thief? Which one do you want to hear? Probably Magic Thief. Magic Thief. Okay. Yeah, okay. I think I'm going to read from Magic Thief, but I'm going to talk a little bit about Winterling first, because some of those ideas, like the where do your ideas come from question, are really relevant to Winterling and to Iowa. Winterling, the book, as you can probably tell from looking at the cover, it's a book that has a lot of the fantastic in it, fantasy in it. And because you've got this girl riding on a horse with flame-colored eyes and pretty fantasy-looking setting. But actually, Winterling starts here in Iowa. And the place that this book came from, the germination of the idea, came from basically driving through the Iowa countryside. And I'd been reading Connie Mutel's book. I don't know if you know her book, The Emerald Horizon. And it's a book about the ecological and natural history of Iowa, like how our landscape came to look the way it does now. And if you drive through Iowa, you're kind of like, at least this part of Iowa, rolling hills, and then there's a song about it. Corn, 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 corn. Look, a tree, corn, corn, corn. So I was driving through Iowa, and I was thinking, you know, on the one hand, as Connie Mutel points out in her book, this is a highly industrialized landscape. This is farming on a huge scale, like big-time agriculture production, you know. And so in that way, it's maybe not beautiful, but I look at the landscape of Iowa, and I see so much beauty here. And I started thinking, okay, we've got this industrial farming landscape, but what about the corners of the land where there's still magic? What about those ravines? What about those places where there are trees and forests left between the farmlands? And so Winterling came directly out of that. Sort of, it begins in Iowa, but the main character, Fur, finds those magical places that are still in our Iowa landscape. And the sequel to Winterling and the third book directly talk about the Iowa landscape and how there's still magic left in some parts of our state. So that's where the idea came from, part of the book. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Magic Thief, which is more specifically magical. It doesn't take place in our world. The ideas for this one really just came out of my head and not from this landscape. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. The Magic Thief takes place. How many people have read it already? I know a bunch. So you guys, lots of people read it. But you haven't heard me read from it, I hope. So Magic Thief takes place in the city of Wilmette, which is just imaginary city. It's a little bit like London, but it's also, if you look carefully at this picture, you might recognize the landscape of this map a little bit, especially if you're from Iowa City. Because as you can see, it's a city with a river running right through the middle of it. There's Manville Heights right there, and the university over here, and here we are at the public library over at the side. So some of the inspiration for this place in the book did come out of living here in Iowa City and wanting to have a town that was kind of divided in the middle by a river. So that was one of the sort of germs of the idea. So I'm going to read to you from the first chapter of The Magic Thief. Some of you may have heard this before, maybe not. But as I said, The Magic Thief takes place in this imaginary city, Wilmette. And on the night when this begins, the city is dark and cold. There's a bad part of town called the Twilight, which is kind of in that bend of the river. And it's pretty much it's a pretty scary part of town. The houses are falling down. There are bad guys lurking on every corner waiting to knock you on the head and steal your money. It's cold and wet and rainy. The main character, Khan, is the narrator of the book. Here's his picture. And he's a gutter boy. And basically what that means is he lives by his wits on the streets of the twilight. He has quick hands, as he will tell you, and he picks pockets, and he also has with him at all times these, which are lock picks. So he's a pickpocket and a lock pick. And that's how he makes his living, basically on the streets. He's a street kid. So this book starts out with Khan on the streets, and he's really, really run out of luck. It's dark, cold, rainy. He hasn't had any dinner. He hasn't had any lunch. Somebody stole his shoes. And he's beginning to get a little bit desperate. And as you know, desperate people sometimes do desperate things. So this is from chapter 1 of The Magic Thief. A thief is a lot like a wizard. I have quick hands and I can make things disappear. But then I stole the wizard's locus magicalicus and nearly disappeared myself forever. It was a late night in the twilight, black dark as the inside of a burglar's bag. The streets were deserted. A sooty fog crept up from the river, and the alleyways echoed with shadows. Around me I felt the city, echoing and empty, desolate and dead. The cobblestones under my bare feet were slick with the evening's rain. No luck that day for my quick pocket pick hands, and I hadn't managed to filch my supper or a bit of copper to buy it with. I was hollow with hunger. I might have tried somewhere else, except that the underlord had a word out on me, and his minions would beat the fluff out of me if they could. Keeping an eye out, I lurked in an alleyway. Then I heard it. Step, step, tap, step, step, tap. I edged back into my alley shadows to wait, and along he came. Old man, I thought, a bent, bearded, cloak-wearing old croakety-croak leaning on a cane, climbing the steep street toward me, muttering to himself. His purse, I decided, would be paying for my dinner, though he didn't know it yet. I was a shadow, a breath of air, light feather fingers, and quick hands. I ghosted up behind him, dipped into his cloak pocket, grabbed what I found within, and was gone, away clean. Or so I thought. The old man went on, not noticing a thing, and I slipped back into my alley shadows and opened my hand to see what I got for my trouble. Even in the shadows, the thing I'd stolen was darker than dark, and though it was small, a stone no bigger than a baby's fist, it was heavier than the heart of a man on his way to the gallows tree. It was a magical thing, the wizard's locus magicalicus. As I stared down at the wizardly stone, it started to glow, soft at first with the red warmth of coals in a winter hearth. Then a sudden fierce flash of lightning, and the alley was alive with dancing, flashing light, the shadows fleeing like frightened black cats. I heard the wizard coming back. Step, step, tap, step, step, tap. Quick, I fisted the stone and shoved it down deep into my pocket. Darkness fell again. As I turned, blinking the brights from my eyes to look, the old man came tip-tapping around the corner and reaching out with a big hand, grabbed me by the shoulder. "Well, boy," he said. His voice was strong and gravelly. I stood still. I know trouble when it grabs me. The old man looked down at me with keen, glancing eyes. Silence for a long, dark moment. In my pocket, the stone that I had stolen weighed and warmed. Then he said, "You look hungry." Well, yes, I was. Carefully, cautiously, I nodded. "Then I will buy you some dinner," the old man said. "Roast pork, perhaps, potatoes and pie." I swallowed. My head was telling me this was not a good idea. The old man was a wizard, clear as clear. And what kind of fool sits down to eat dinner with a wizard? But my empty since yesterday's stomach was telling me even louder that it wanted pork and peppered potatoes and pie. It told me to nod and I did. Well then, the old man wizard said, the chop house on the corner is still open. He let me go and started step-tapping down the street, and I went with him. I am Nevery, he said, and your name? Telling wizards your name is generally not a good idea. I didn't answer, just walked along beside him. The wizard seemed to be looking ahead to the chop house on the corner, but I caught a glimpse of his keen gleam eyes watching me from under the brim of his hat. The chop house was lit by a coal fire in the hearth and was empty except for its keeper. Dinner, the wizard ordered, and held up 2 fingers. The chop house keeper nodded and went to fetch the food. We settled at a table, me with my back against the wall, Nevery blocking my way to the door. Well, boy, the wizard said, taking off his hat, a cold, wet night for travelers, is it not? Cold, wet night for anyone, I thought. I nodded. He looked at me. I looked back. Yet you seem healthy enough, he said, as if talking to himself. No ill effects that I can see. Ill effects? What was he talking about? You never did tell me your name, he said, and I wasn't going to either. I shrugged. Nevery opened his mouth to say something else when the chop house keeper delivered our food, plunking down full plates before us. The pork chops were fragrant and crisp, the potatoes swimming in butter with a sprinkling of black pepper over their shiny brown backs. The chop house keeper returned and added a plate of pie oozing with berries and dusted with sugar. The wizard said something, but I didn't hear him. I picked up my fork and cut open a potato. I let butter soak in for a second and then took an enormous bite. I said, the wizard said, scowling at me, that my locus magicalicus will likely kill you, boy, very soon. I'm astonished it hasn't done so already. I gulped. My bite of potato slid like a lump of lead down my throat, and I heard the echo as it landed in my empty stomach. Kill me, did he say? The locust stone would kill me? That's where I'm going to stop reading. I will tell you that that's page 7, and the book is 419 pages long. So you can probably guess that Khan does not die at this time from stealing the locus magicalicus, although he does have some close calls in the rest of the book. So that's from the first chapter of The Magic Thief. The chapter ends with Nevery saying, because you are not dead, you interest me. So Khan goes on to have more magical adventures with Nevery in the city of Wellmet. So that leaves us with a couple minutes for questions. So you guys can ask about writing, publishing. You can ask about the Magic Thief books. I know she's going to ask something about Winterling because she's a big Winterling fan. But go ahead, fair game. Questions are fair game. So why don't you go? You go first, and then we'll come around. Go ahead.
I actually have 2 questions.
Okay. Why don't you do one, and then I'll ask somebody else, and then we'll come back to you. Okay. Okay. Sound good. Okay. Go ahead. First question.
So, when are you said that was coming out in 2000. The next one was coming out in.
Yeah, I'll tell you when my books are coming out. Okay, so Winterling came out last year in January of 2012. And then the sequel to Winterling comes out in April. So that's the next one. And then there's a 4th Magic Thief book that comes out in a little over a year, in 2014, which is a really long time to wait when you're your age. It's a long time to wait when you're my age, too. But it'll get here eventually. So that's your first question. Hang on to your second one. I'm going to go to somebody else, and then I'll come back. Okay? Go ahead.
Do you find children like real life or what you just read, something made up?
Do kids like real life or what I just read? You know what's really interesting is last night there was a presentation by the kids who'd won the writing contest for the festival. And I was really surprised at how many of them engaged with fantasy. There were so many dragons and unicorns, and there was cyclops and magic. And I think that kids find that the world of the imagination is literally like an open book to them. There's no barrier. They just easily enter into that world. So while realistic fiction is for some people like easier, it's easier to cross into a book that's realistic because it's our world and it's known. I think for kids, they just enter that magical world like that. And
Think they like it better?
I don't know, but it depends on the reader. It depends on the reader whether they like it better or not. Some kids are they don't even want to read fiction. They just want all nonfiction all the time. But for some kids, fantasy is really kind of an easy step to make. Yeah. Well, I got to go back here, and then I'll come back to you guys. Okay, go ahead. Second question.
Okay. My second question was,
Do you want me to come back?
yeah.
Okay, I'll come back. Okay. So next question, somebody over here. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
When you write something, do you start out with the ending in mind, or is it just
Okay, she's asking, do I start out with the ending in mind when I'm writing something? And the answer to that is sadly no. Some authors, I don't know if you were here to hear Wendy Del Sol speak earlier, but she talked about how she writes 500 words a day and has this sort of plan for every week she writes 2,500 words, which is like enormously impressive to me because I write with no plan at all. I have no idea what's going to happen in my books. And part of the fun for me is actually writing to find out what happened. So, The Magic Thief was a trilogy, and I had no idea at the beginning where Khan would end up at the end. Yeah, just wherever it goes. Whatever, the characters are the one driving the bus for me, unfortunately. Not always a good thing, but I have to find out where they're going to take me. Yeah, and it's really fun. I have a good time writing it. Hopefully they never run into like a tree or something, because then that would be a problem. But okay, should I come back? Yeah, okay, ready. Here we go.
How did you? It seems all the books you write have something to do with some sort of magic.
Mhm.
Why do you write about magic?
Okay, so the question is, all my books have something to do with magic. Why do you write about magic? Like, why do you write fantasy, basically? One of the really things that I love about writing is that basically anything is possible. There are no boundaries in writing. In fantasy, that's even more true. In the world of the fantastic, in our world, kids' role is generally like you have your parents and you go to school and you go to soccer practice after school and maybe you take ballet lessons or whatever. But you kind of have this set life, And in fantasy world, the kids' world is anything is possible. Even one little kid like Khan can save a city, an entire city. And so because of those possibilities, it's the reason that I write fantasy. Also dragons. I have a thing about dragons, so yeah, total dragon thing. So you can't have dragons in this world, I don't think. So, okay, next question. Go ahead.
What are your biggest influences in your development as a writer? Is it other writers? Is it your life? Is it...
Okay, so the question is, what are my influences as a writer? Am I influenced by other writers or by life or whatever? I definitely draw on some of the books that I've read as inspiration. So I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And because he created these worlds that are really rich and real, Middle-earth feels real, even though it's an imagined place. So I'm totally inspired by that. Another huge inspiration for me, believe it or not, is Laura Ingalls Wilder. Because when she created her vision of like frontier America, everything about that world. I mean, it feels real. Her descriptions are so real, and especially her descriptions of food. I don't know if you could get that out of my first chapter, but food is really important to my characters. And in the same way, like if you read Farmer Boy, same way it is for Almanza Wilder. So that's another big inspiration. But I'm inspired by other writers, by my colleagues, and the kinds of work that they're doing, and interacting with them and inspiring each other, too. So, yeah. Next question. Any other questions? Yes?
Julie's dad.
Okay.
So when you're reading out loud, Julie knows not to get a lot of alliteration that comes out hearing it. Do you, when you're writing, do you think it out loud or do you say it or just?
Okay, so he wants to know about the sound of the words and the alliteration, especially in The Magic Thief. And when I started writing The Magic Thief, the first lines of the book, a thief is a lot like a wizard. I have quick hands and I can make things disappear. the rhythm of those words were the inspiration for me, and the sound of Khan's voice was the inspiration for the book when I was writing it. That's not always the case with my writing, but in that particular case, it was all about the alliteration and about the sound of the words and stuff. And one of the really fun things about being a writer is it's almost like the words are clay, and you have to shape them into the shape that you're imagining, and you kind of try them out in different arrangements, and you finally get to the place almost maybe like putting a puzzle together, like that piece clicks and that's right and it feels right. So the words are really important. They're like, I know of course they're written in words, but for some people it's the characters or the plot or whatever. For me it's the words. Yeah. Next question. Anything? Yeah. Yes, you. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
Looking at you. Sorry.
Just shy. Looking at your map
Uh-huh.
when you came in, and I'm curious, when you walk downtown, you walk around here, where are you? Are you in Wilmette? Are you here?
Oh. No, I'm here in Iowa City. He was noticing that the map is, as I said earlier, a lot like Iowa City downtown. But I think that...
Avoid Mosquito Flats because it's a bad neighborhood, according to your...
Yeah, right. Well, I just moved away from the middle of the twilight, the bad part of town. I've just moved outside of town, but I used to live in the bad part of town. But I think that even when you're writing fantasy, like the landscape around you, people ask, like, where do you get your ideas? And they're here, like seriously, walking downtown, you can have ideas even for a fantasy world. Even if it's something as simple as, crossing the river and noticing the way the river is flowing or anything like that. So I think, yes, I inhabit this world, but my mind is definitely trying to inhabit at the same time the imaginary, the fantastic world too, of the world of possibility maybe. So a question here, and then do we have time for maybe one more? After
Let's
that?
do maybe one more question,
How about
please.
two more?
Two more
I'll
questions.
talk fast. Go ahead.
How did you come up with the name of the wizard?
Of the wizard. Oh, how did I come up with the name of the wizard? Nevery. Sometimes people ask me about how my characters get their names, and unfortunately, I don't have a very good answer to this question because my characters, you know how you have a name? It would feel weird if you had a different name, right? Because your name is part of who you are. And my characters are the same way. It's like their names come with them. They come with the name. And so I don't remember making up the names most of the time. It's like, hello, Nevery. This is Nevery, okay? So they just that's who they are, yeah. So last question.
Okay, I just want to make a comment. I saw a movie with an adult that was blind, and then when he had surgery and got his sight back, all his life from a child to an adult not being able to see. Before he went blind as a child, he remembered this pink cloud, fluffy thing. And then after he could see, he kept searching all over for this fluffy thing. And finally he went to a hockey game, and the fluffy thing was cotton candy. And I thought that was really neat. Just
That is
listening
funny.
to you tell your stories, how you come up with things when you just,
Just sort of out of the imagination,
little
yeah,
boy, he saw
yeah.
cotton candy, and then all his life
Yeah.
not being able to see.
Well, I have to say, I mentioned Laura Ingalls Wilder as an inspiration. I think one of the reasons her landscapes feels so real is because she was describing them for Mary, who was blind. And so, the sort of bringing something out of nothing is very true to what authors do. So I think I got to do the drawing?
Yeah, we'll do a couple of drawings, but
Okay.
but again, can we thank Sarah for sharing with us today?
Thank you. Hi, Laura.